2 years ago, I was in high school working my butt off at a paint-your-own pottery store. It was the night before Thanksgiving, and our store was slammed. I always worked the night shift, closing at 9 or 10 depending on the night. But some nights, I wouldn't get home until midnight with all our closing duties, especially during the holidays. My boss made me stay late that night to decorate the store for Thanksgiving, so I was trapped in that strip mall till 11. I made my way home, super tired after working, and all I could think about was how great Thanksgiving was gonna be. I called my mom on the drive back, like I did every night. No answer. I figured she was too busy catching up with my older sister, who just came home from college. Shrugging it off, I made my way home. I pulled into my driveway and walked up to the front door, greeted by the glow of our living room lights as always. Now, I'm lazy and hated digging in my bag for keys, much less fighting the lock in the dark, so I would usually ring the bell and wait for whoever was up to let me in. No one came. Annoyed, I eventually found the keys and finagled them into the lock, where, upon turning, I heard the door click shut, relocking. I quickly realized the door had been unlocked the whole time, and made my way inside. The door swung open quietly to the living room. All the lights were on when I came in. The TV was playing. Nothing looked out of place, except the room was empty. That was when I felt uneasy. I'm from a family of 6 loud New Yorkers. Our house is never quiet, so the emptiness and the small unusual changes to routine threw me off. I called out, thinking someone was further back in the house, only to get no response. I moved past the kitchen to check the bedrooms. My parents' was dark and empty. Then I checked my little sister's rooms, also empty. Where would my 8-year-old sister be 11:30 at night? I pulled out my phone and called my mom again. Then I heard something in the kitchen. I moved over there quickly and peeked around the corner. No one was there, but on the counter were both of my parents' cell phones. Not to sound like a complete millennial, but no one leaves the house without their phone anymore. At that point, I was truly freaking out. I grabbed the biggest knife in our kitchen and hid in the pantry to call my other sisters. Neither picked up. My entire family had vanished into thin air and were radio silent. I got the hell out of there and proceeded to hide in my car. I was trying to think of any rational reason why no one would be home or available, but couldn't. It was then I noticed the pool lights. At the time, we lived in Florida and had a pool that changed colors at night. Our backyard was a veritable jungle of trees, palms, and 10-foot tall bushes, so the pool was the only source of light, but often got obscured by the plants. At night, you couldn't see the yard from inside the house because of them. It was all black windows or reflections of the house. I tell you this because as I fled to my car, I thought to check the backyard and garage because I couldn't bring myself to check the key rack inside. I tiptoed around the side of the house and poked my nose up to the garage window and shot my phone camera in, knife firmly in hand. All of the cars were there. I listened at the back gate, which only opened from the inside, and didn't hear a thing. The pool wasn't even running, only the lights were on. I specifically started calling for my cat, who likes to roam, because I knew my family would know it's me if they had been back there, without tipping a person potentially hiding in the back. But, again, there was no response. I ran back to my car crying and freaking out. I pulled up to my friend's house and scared her too with this crazy story, because I couldn't stand to be alone just then. I proceeded to call all my neighbors and ask if maybe my parents had walked over for a beer, or if my sisters were sleeping over. No one had seen them, and they were all mildly concerned, but hung up as soon as they could, considering it was midnight. My friend was super supportive and sat up with me as I debated calling the police. Around 1 a.m., I got a call from my oldest sister, asking me to let her in the gate of our gated community, and why I wasn't home. I silently let her in on my phone, and met her at the house, where I went off on her, and then found out what actually happened. She had been picked up by old friends to hang out. My sisters had been invited to a church sleepover, and were probably asleep by the time I got home. When we walked in the door, my parents were sitting in the living room, and again, asked where I had been and why I was home so late. Apparently, they had been in the pool/hot tub for a few hours of night swimming. It was surreal, like I was in the Twilight Zone earlier and had been placed back into reality. There was no one in the backyard or pool when I checked. You can't use the hot tub without the pump being on, and there was not a single sound of water or human life. Yet, they claim I was the one who disappeared, the one who left the lights on and the doors unlocked. I honestly wonder how all of these events happened at just the right time to create such a terrifying experience. So, this happened when I was about 18. I just moved out of my mom's house in the summer to live near my boyfriend while he attended college and I worked full-time. For context, I'm a woman. I lived with 3 other girls in a shifty apartment building. It happened to be around Thanksgiving, and because I worked a minimum wage job I was new at, I wasn't going to request a week off to go home, which was fine. More money anyways. After a few days of being in the apartment complex alone, I noticed it was just me and the old man in the apartment above me. Neither of us had a car, so the entire parking lot was empty. I worked from about 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., closing at a coffee shop. One of these boring days, I walked the block to the bus stop. The buses were running at odd hours as it was a college campus and all the students were gone for break. Now, I've always been aware of things around me. People, noises, placement of things. I've been through some horrible things, but this one still scares me, even though I now live states away. I was waiting at the bus stop just before dark when a man showed up, probably 24 years old and 5'5" with a muscular build. He smiled at me, which made me feel better. I'd never even seen where he'd come from. He was just there, behind me suddenly, and struck up a conversation. He had really dark eyes that seemed to never look away. I remember even thinking to myself that he wasn't blinking, just pure deranged crazy in his eyes, which didn't match the smile he plastered on his face. He spoke to me for a bit and asked how I was and what I was up to. He said he was from Africa and studying for his master's. He seemed well versed in what he said he was studying, so I never assumed he was lying. Eventually, the bus comes and we both get on, sitting around the same part in the front. I ride for about 5 minutes before getting off and walk the rest of the way to work. I go in, clock in, and start my shift. I glance up outside, and there he is, the guy from the bus. I thought it was weird, of course, and pointed it out to my coworkers. Everyone agreed it was weird as well. He just idles by the door. One of 10 people I've seen in the whole town since break started, and it had to be this guy. He stayed for about an hour and eventually fades away without me noticing. I go on with my shift, not thinking too deep into it. The idea that I carried a knife was enough to comfort me. After the shift, I get back on the bus towards home, walk through the empty parking lot, and into my quiet apartment building. I was on the second of 3 floors. I skipped steps with my keys out already, and when I reached the top of the steps, guess who's there? The same guy that followed me to work. This is when I knew I should be concerned. I didn't think anyone else lived in the building, and I never mentioned I did, and I certainly did not mention my apartment number. He looks up, seeing me, and gives another one of those friendly smiles, and says my name cheerfully, another thing I never told him. I acknowledged him, and as I moved around him to enter my apartment, he moved back and started to go downstairs. So I opened the door, and he immediately ran back up and puts his arm on the door. Somehow, he did this so friendly. I almost thought he did have good intentions. He mentions that he can see my Xbox in the living room from the door and rushes in to play. He eagerly asks me to play and starts sitting down, taking off his shoes. I mentioned that my roommates are asleep and I couldn't hang out as I had work early in the morning and my boyfriend was coming over soon. All lies, of course. He couldn't take the hint, so I asked him to hang out another time, which of course I wouldn't do. He mentions that he lives across the hall diagonal from me, which was strange because I was acquaintances with a few people who live there, and I wasn't familiar with him. I became scared. I told him I'd be back and went to the bathroom as I left my front door open. I immediately called my boyfriend. Now, I'm not sure why I didn't just call the cops. I suppose I didn't want to make a scene. Anyways, my boyfriend tells me he's sending a friend to come get me, who also still happened to be in town. I was freaked out and decided, okay, I'll just go out and play nice. But when I exit the bathroom, he's putting his shoes on and starts leaving. I was confused but happy. He tries to hug me and I declined, saying I was a bit sick. He nods and leaves my apartment. He walks about 10 feet to the apartment diagonal from me and goes in smiling and wishing me a good night. I shut the door, making sure it was locked. I then proceeded to check the other doors and windows in my apartment. All the windows were good. I checked the lock on the back door. It's unlocked. My heart dropped to my stomach. I immediately burst into tears. I knew for a fact I had locked this door and placed a long wooden stick to keep it from sliding open. I even checked it twice before I left for work. The stick was gone, and I never actually found it. We reported it to the police, as it was clear his intentions were not good. The cop checked the apartment and nobody answered, so they left a patrol car nearby. The next day, they contacted the building owners and were able to enter the apartment. Big surprise, he didn't live there. Apparently, he had been squatting there since the 4 people who lived there left for Thanksgiving. Nothing else was done, which makes sense. Nobody else knew this guy, where he lived, went to school, or anything. I now, of course, understand the situation in its entirety, along with what I should have done versus what I did do. Be safe out there. Last Thanksgiving, I was driving home from college with my friend. We're both female and we're 21 at the time. I live in a very isolated part of Arkansas that requires driving through an hour of hairpin turns in the mountains. There are lots of blind turns, and the whole time, you're driving on the edge of huge drop-offs with no barriers. I'm usually pretty confident driving through the mountains, but we were in my friend's car, so I was going slower than usual, driving about 5 over the speed limit. Almost as soon as we started the roughest part of the drive, another car started tailgating us pretty close. This was stressing me out, and as soon as I saw somewhere I could pull over, I did. I pulled into a church parking lot, and my friend offered to drive the rest of the way, but I declined as it was completely dark and she had never driven this route before. We get back on our way, and a few minutes later, I have to come to a screeching halt as there's a car stopped in the middle of the road. It wasn't on the shoulder at all, just stopped dead in the middle of the road. My friend is saying that they must have broken down but can't call a tow because there's no service in this area. I immediately have a bad feeling though and lock the doors. I tell my friend to stay in the car no matter what. She's starting to get scared at this point and points out that she thinks it was the car that was following us. I can't tell, but I'm very scared too. It's parked right before a hairpin turn, so I can't pass it. My friend starts frantically telling me to go ahead and pass it, but I don't want to get hit by a Mack truck or fall off the mountain. I honk my horn. Nothing happens, and no chance of calling for help as there's no service here. We wait there for a while, doing nothing. My friend is crying and freaking out, but I'm too scared to try to pass them. I honk a couple of times. And eventually, a guy gets out of the car, comes around back, and leans against his car, just staring at us. My friend is freaking out even more, and I'm just frozen. I tell her not to make eye contact. I'm ready to floor it if he does something, but he just stands there, staring. He's not checking his car or anything, just staring. I try to stay calm and pray that another car will come along soon. This went on for what felt like forever, but was probably 15 plus minutes. Eventually, we see car lights in our rearview mirror, and then the guy jogs to his door and gets back in his car. He speeds off, going dangerously fast, so there was nothing wrong with his car. I start driving, not wanting to cause a wreck. We don't see anything else for a while, but we pass the same car parked along the highway a while later, and it pulls back on and starts tailing us again. I try to speed up and get rid of him, but he keeps following. We have cell service at this point, but I don't know if we should call the cops because nothing really happened. I call home and tell my brothers what was going on, and tell them to wait on the porch for us. The car follows me all the way home, down the really long driveway to my house, and my two brothers are waiting on the porch holding their deer rifles. I pull in, and the car just goes to the end of the driveway, loops around, and speeds off back the way it came. We tried to see the plates, but we couldn't make them out. Me and my friend were really freaked out, but when I told other friends the whole story, they didn't think it was a big deal. I was about 24 years old, working both the bakery and the deli at a brand new neighborhood market, aka Walmart. Everyone had called off that day. It was about a week into opening. Barely anyone ever showed up for work, so our store was relatively empty of staff. But this time was worse because it was the week of Thanksgiving, so everything was hectic. I sliced cheese for this guy in a red sweater early that morning. He barely talked, just pointed to the chub of cheese and said, 2 pounds. I slice it up for him. I then return to the bakery to bake some French bread. The deli is at the back of the store. You go through the walk-in fridge and it opens up through the bakery. The other door in the bakery leads right into the back room. This detail will be important later in the story. So I've got the bread baking and come back into the deli about 20 minutes later, where I see the guy from before just standing by the shelves. I try not to think anything of it and start cooking some chicken. He pulls up his hood and just continues standing by the shelves near the deli case. I ask if he needs anything, and he doesn't respond. He just stands there and stares at me quietly. I get a bit wary and go into the back corner for my walkie-talkie. My friend works security at the store, so I call him and tell him what's up. My friend tells me to act casual and go into the bakery, and he'll check out the guy. I'm bagging up French bread when my friend comes in, saying that he had a chat with the guy and he's just taking his time shopping. I mention that he has no cart or groceries outside of the cheese, and is kind of freaking me out since I'm literally the only staff in the back of the store. My friend tells me that he'll do rounds every hour until we close, and I thank him for his help. I put out the bread and find the guy leaning against the deli case, almost hanging out behind it. I ask him if he needs anything, and he just shakes his head no. I tell him he can't be behind the counter, so he scoots back just until he's out of the area, and I kind of smile a little, thanking him before starting to pack up the chicken. At this point, I don't want to be there, but I can't just not work. Every hour or so, security does the rounds, and the guy moves back to the shelves when they show up, before returning right back to the deli case. I grab my walkie as I head to close the bakery, and I tell the manager up front that I'm starting to get scared of the customer, and I don't feel safe. She promises to check things out, and I stay in the bakery. About half an hour passes, and the manager comes back to tell me that they had the guy leave. I thank her and finish cleaning up the bakery. Now, everything seems fine as I start cleaning the deli, but then I hear the bell ring, and come out to find that same customer there. He asks me if he can just have half a pound of the cheese he asked for before. I do as he says, hand him the cheese, and he walks over to the chicken. I'm pretty much watching him constantly as I'm closing up. Security comes around, and I tell my friend that the manager had him leave, yet he's back again, and I don't think I can do my job. Knowing I had an hour left of my shift, my friend entertains the guy, distracting him by talking about food, so I can hurry up my cleaning. As I finish, my friend and I share a look, and he heads back up front to talk to the manager about the guy returning. The guy just stays by the chicken, so I assume all is fine. I then go into the kitchen and start shutting everything down. My hands turn off the lights, and I look up, and there he is, the guy, just standing in front of the door. I panic, telling him we're closed. He pushes open the door and starts rushing at me. I freak the hell out, yanking open the walk-in door, running through it the best I can without running into anything, and run into the bakery to escape into the back room. At this point, I'm shaking, and I hear what sounds like the guy following me through the fridge, the plastic guards rattling. I panic and run out of the back room through the store and straight up to security and the manager. I tell them what's going on and that I'm leaving. They try to calm me down while the manager calls the police. As I'm standing there, the guy in the sweater is making his way through the store. He's pointing at me and shouting. I'm freaking out, telling him to leave me alone. The manager tries to keep me calm, and my friend tells him to leave me alone and get out of the store. He's got his hands up to keep him away, as the guy just keeps walking closer to us, pushing against my friend. Luckily, we're located in an outdoor mall, so mall security arrives, thanks to the police calling them to help until they get here. They take over for my friend, and he escorts me to my car, apologizing for what happened. I tell him it's fine, but I'm not up for working for a while, and he totally understood. I say bye and rush home to literally curl up in bed and just try to get my mind off of it. I called off for the rest of the week because I was just too scared to return. My store manager called me in the middle of the week to apologize for what happened and asked me to come back, promising that I'd no longer be left alone like that. I agreed to return and asked him what happened with the guy. Apparently, they literally had no idea what he wanted with me. They kept questioning him and he just wouldn't talk. I guess they arrested him for harassment and trespassing charges, and that's all they knew. Needless to say, I put in a transfer to the supercenter because I was done with potentially risking my life for a minimum wage job. This happened years ago. Let's just say my name is Jenna for the story's sake. I usually visit my family's cottage up north every summer, and on occasion on the 4th of July and Thanksgiving. It's a waterfront cottage, facing a lake, surrounded by a dense forest. It's located on a private beach, so you see your neighbors every once in a while. Everyone comes up north around the same time, so it wouldn't be uncommon to have a chat with the others, and thus, everyone knows each other, and subsequently, their business. My cottage sits between two others. One is inhabited quite frequently, and one is abandoned, to my knowledge. My family and neighbors know the European family that owns it. Back when I was young, around the ages of 18 to 20, my cousin's brother and I would get away from our family to smoke in the abandoned cottage to avoid any sort of scolding. It was fun. An empty cottage with some furniture that was a time capsule from the 80s. We would peer around and look at the old brown love seat, the dark den, and the cute little kitchen with the old wine glasses laying around. It was well known that others have been through the abandoned cottage as well. There were joints on the ground, footprints, old beer bottles with modern labels, and furniture was always moved around from one position to another. However, the cottage was never spruced up. It was never cleaned or organized, so we knew that the owners weren't coming by. It was random explorers, perhaps other teenagers doing the same thing we did. Upon some curious investigation, we saw a basement. We opened the door and saw a staircase that led to a floor that was pure dirt. It looked like a cellar from what I could see. Of course, we would freak each other out, saying that there was a serial killer living down there. None of us would go down there with our independent conviction. It would have to have been a dare or a display of bravery. One day, around Thanksgiving, 4 of us, 3 girls and my brother, went to the abandoned cottage to go smoke and gossip about family. I don't see my cousins much, only during special occasions, so we sat on the tables in the dining area to chill. Of course, the topic of the basement came up. We laughed and talked about who would go down there and who would most likely survive the serial killer living beneath us, waiting for his next victim to enter his abode. We turned and noticed the basement was unlocked, and this was unusual since it was always locked. The one occasion where it was unlocked was when we took a look, or one of my brothers would go down there to freak all the girls out and prove his macho, so to speak. We would always lock it afterwards, purely out of the feeling of some sort of reassurance. We chalked it up to other teenagers just like us having visited the cottage before us, and all of us girls made my older brother get up and lock the door. He stood, looked us all up and down, and jokingly said something along the lines of, "You guys are just scared. Always get a man to do the scary things for you." We laughed, but he was the guy. If there was someone down there, he would be the most likely to defend himself. He's a big guy, 210 pounds and 6'5". He took maybe 3 steps before there was a knock. It sounded like a knock on a hollow surface. Considering that this cottage is quite old, I thought it came from the side of the building. I instantly looked at my brother, who looked smug. He said, "You know, if you're gonna ask me to do something for you, don't mess with me while I'm doing you a favor." I looked around, waiting for one of the 2 other girls, my cousins, to fess up and mock his masculine courage. It seemed like everyone was resoundingly confused, anxious, and waiting for the same thing. I guess my brother saw their reactions and didn't see mine, and thought I was the source of the suspicious knocking, since my back was turned to him. "Very funny, Jenna," my brother said with a chuckle. I turned to him, and I guess he saw my anxious face as well. I thought that maybe him walking on the old floors unsettled some of the structural integrity of the building. Maybe it was one of our parents messing with us. I didn't think it was from a foreign source. I quipped at him, "Just go and lock the door." He continued walking toward the door, but it opened slightly. He stopped dead in his tracks immediately. "We're going now. Screw this door," one of my cousins sternly said. We all got up from sitting on the table, gathered our stuff, and quickly ran to the front door, not daring to look back, my brother being the last one. I heard significant footsteps coming from the back of the cottage. I thought it was my brother, and I turned back, and I swear to God, I saw a hand opening the basement door. "Oh my God," I yelled. "There's someone in the basement," I managed to shakingly say after running down the stairs that led to the front door. My brother looked back and screamed. He held on to the side of my arms to push me to go faster. "Go," we heard a foreign voice say. Dropping our things, we ran so fast our slides fell off. I knew it wasn't any of us, not even one of our parents. It was a low, stern voice from afar, and my brother was right behind me. We made our escape to our cottage, thoroughly flustered and terrified. "There was a homeless guy in there. I saw him," my brother, out of breath, managed to say. We ran to our parents and told them our story. They called the cops, and we watched from afar to see what the hell was going on. I guess the guy left, cause the police came to us and told us no one was in there. But my brother was still curious, so he went back and found some dead squirrels and baby raccoons just laying in the living room. He said they looked fresh. It's possible that someone or something might have put him there as some sort of message to any oncoming visitors. I hope it wasn't that homeless guy.